Hi everyone, welcome back to Extra Credit, and today is our 4th episode on ancient Greece. So last time we learned all about the city-state of Athens and saw that it was one of the 2 chief city-states during the time of the Persian Wars, which is the main subject of this series. Today we're going to learn all about the other chief city-state of ancient Greece, Athens' great partner, and on that note, all that needs to be said is...
This is SPARTA!
No, actually, there's a lot more that needs to be said, but you can't not start with that. So the partnership between Athens and Sparta as the 2 chief city-states of ancient Greece during the time of the Persian Wars really makes for one of the oddest couples in the entire history of odd couples, and yes, that includes both Legolas and Gimli, and Rocket and Groot. But to be fair, it doesn't really matter who you compare the Spartans to. They were just plain nuts. The city of Sparta itself is located about 150 miles west of Athens on a big chunk of land called the Peloponnese. And it was the geography of Sparta in this unique part of Greece that helped to shape Sparta's own unique and bizarre history. See, the fact that the Spartans were much further away from water than lots of other Greek city-states meant that they had a hard time getting access to resources that other cities could have taken for granted. But rather than getting these resources in normal and healthy ways like trading with their neighbors, the Spartans chose to get these resources in abnormal and unhealthy ways, such as conquering and enslaving their neighbors. This was in fact the harsh fate of the people of Messenia, who lived in the countryside around Sparta in its earliest days. In a couple of wars between the years 750 and 650 BC, the Spartans slowly but surely conquered this entire land and enslaved the people who lived there. These slaves became known as the Helots, and it was the Spartans' need to keep the Helots under control that became the #1 driving force in their history. With this goal in mind, the Spartans therefore dedicated their lives to one thing and one thing only: poking badgers with spoons. No, just kidding, that's probably super dangerous, don't try that. No, to make sure the Helots couldn't rise against them, the Spartans dedicated their entire way of life to war, making it their personal mission to forge themselves into the most indestructible soldiers the world had ever seen. Now, we've already said that the Spartans were weird, but the #1 biggest difference between them and Athens, for example, was their attitude towards personal freedom. Namely, the Spartans didn't have any. From the moment of their birth until their death, the life of every Spartan citizen, whether male or female, belonged entirely to the state and existed to serve its city's purposes. For men, this meant becoming mighty warriors, and for women, this meant giving birth to mighty warriors, so... Any questions? The first test of a Spartan's life began with their very first breath. Upon their birth, they were presented to a council called the Ephors, who formed a part of the Spartan government. The Ephors would inspect each child, and if they found any physical defect at all, that baby was then taken out into the wilderness and left on the slopes of a mountain to die. This brutal practice was called exposure, and although it was common in the ancient world, what made the Spartans' use of exposure so unique was the fact that it was entirely controlled and directed not by the parents of the child, but by the government of Sparta. The goal was to forge the strongest society possible by weeding out and terminating the weak, a practice with disturbing echoes in the 20th century, as the Nazi government essentially did the same thing to German children for the same reason. But for Spartan children who managed to make it over this first obstacle, life didn't necessarily get a whole lot easier from that point on. Spartan parenting was not known for being overly gentle, and male children who survived until age 7 were automatically enrolled in the Agoge, aka history's hardest school of hard knocks. The whole point of the Agoge schooling system was to eradicate the weakness in every child using all possible methods, and they really did use all possible methods. The boys were constantly underfed, disciplined physically, and were only given one measly piece of clothing to wear no matter what the weather was doing. Rather than living at home with mom and dad, Spartan boys also shared a rugged military barracks together where their food supply was strictly limited in order to get them used to the harsh life on military campaign. As if that wasn't all bad enough, when they finally did get to eat, it was often a special Spartan creation called black broth, which was a soup made of pork, vinegar, salt, and blood. It was an acquired taste. So to give kids a way of dealing with the less than awesome food situation, adult Spartans actually encouraged boys to steal extra food so long as they weren't caught. This gave rise to one of the most famous Spartan folk tales of all time about a boy who stole a fox and hid it underneath his cloak. Then when one of his elders approached him to talk to him, the boy just stood there nodding quietly while the fox literally clawed open his stomach and ripped out his intestines. Say what you will, but that takes guts. Now, keep in mind, the original purpose for this way of life was to help the Spartans stay strong enough to stay on top of the Helots so their slaves wouldn't rebel against them. After all, the slavery of the Helots was the foundation of Spartan life, and the Spartans knew that if the Helots ever got freed, they'd have to do normal stuff like eat food and not freeze to death. So with this goal in mind, every year the Spartan government would officially declare war on the Helots just so it wouldn't be illegal to beat them up and harass them. On top of this, the best and brightest Spartan boys were chosen to form a special squad called the Crypteia, whose job was to keep the Helots in their place. Members of the Crypteia would roam the Spartan countryside, beating up, harassing, and sometimes even killing any Helots they came across. So just like we should remember that the achievements of Athens weren't possible without slavery, the achievements of Sparta wouldn't have been possible aside from the fact that their entire way of life was built on government-sponsored terrorism. But so far we've talked about just the one gender, so what were the girls up to all this time while the boys were away having fun starving, freezing, and getting disemboweled by foxes? Well, as it turns out, Spartan girls actually had one of the most well-rounded educations in all of Greece. Unlike Athenian girls, who were mostly expected to stay home with their mothers, Spartan girls learned how to read, write, dance, do gymnastics, and even javelin throwing. The girls even got to exercise outdoors together with the boys sometimes, occasions that were made all the more noteworthy by the fact that both the boys and girls had to wear this for a uniform. There's nothing there. Where's the picture? Oh. Well, that's awkward. So, horrifying gym classes aside, the main emphasis in a Spartan girl's upbringing was physical fitness, because it was thought that only a strong, healthy woman could give birth to a strong, healthy boy. And it was because of their role as the mothers of Sparta's future warriors that Spartan women actually had a whole lot more power than most women in other Greek city-states. After all, with the men away training for battle or taking part in real wars, it was the women who stepped in to run the show back home, taking care of all kinds of business that other Greek women never could have dreamt of doing. In fact, Spartan females had such an unusually high amount of influence in their society, when one of them was once asked, "Why is it that you Spartan women are the only women who rule over their men?" The Spartan woman replied, "Because we're the only women who give birth to men." Finally, if we want to truly understand the role that Sparta played in the upcoming Persian Wars, we need to also take a look at their really bad case of xenophobia. And no, that only sounds like a skin condition. Xenophobia is a Greek word meaning fear and suspicion towards foreigners, meaning that the Spartans had a deep and permanent mistrust of anybody from beyond their borders. And it was in part this deep-rooted xenophobia that made the Spartans so hesitant to get involved in military conflicts away from home. This wasn't based on a lack of bravery, but rather the simple fear that with the army gone, the Helots would seize their chance to go full-on Mockingjay. As a result, the Spartans quickly earned the reputation of sticking closer to home than your average Bagans. But as both Bilbo and Frodo could have told the Spartans, even when you do your absolute best to stay out of trouble, sometimes trouble has a way of finding you. So on that note, now that we've become acquainted with the Greek side of things, next time we'll meet the third and final contender in the epic clash to come. The rulers of a legendary empire so vast, so mighty, that no pipsqueak city-state could ever hope to stand up to them and live to tell the tale. The Persians. Who actually aren't nearly as scary as I thought they'd be. I mean, look at them. Hey everybody, thanks for watching Extra Credit. It's always a great time making this show, and hopefully you and maybe even your friends and family are enjoying the series so far. This week's pop quiz is to name 2 things that Spartan girls learned to do in school, and as always, drop off your answer in room 215 for your chance to win an edible prize. As always, work hard, read books, play outside, and we'll see you next time.